Hey there, Fletcher from All Things Overlanding here. Today I'm going to be talking about why a Nissan Xterra, Frontier, Pathfinder may be the perfect overlanding vehicle. I've owned an Xterra and I currently own a Frontier, so if you're looking for a vehicle, if you're undecided, if you want something that's reliable but also sort of budget friendly, then something like that may be a perfect choice for you. But let's get into why a Nissan Xterra, Pathfinder, or Frontier are the perfect overlanding vehicles. All right, so as I mentioned on the intro, today I'm talking about the sort of second gen, like '05 and newer Pathfinder, Xterra, and Frontier. Those things have been around forever with very minimal changes. The Xterra went out in 2015. I believe that the second gen Pathfinder changed in like 2012 or 14, something around that range. And then the Frontiers are still currently being made. They're now a new body style, and there were some pretty heavy changes in like 2020, I think. New engine, things like that, new transmission that's now in the new version of the truck. But from '05 until about 2019, the Frontier was exactly the same. The Xterra was pretty much the same from '05 until 2015. And then the Pathfinder was pretty much the same from 2005 through 2012, I believe. So why are these vehicles such great options for overlanding? Now, bias aside, I'm going to flat out lay it out there. I'm a Nissan person, right? So if you guys are looking for Nissan content, if you're looking for someone that's going to kind of give you the pros and cons of Nissans, there are some cons too, don't get me wrong, right? I'm going to give you the honest truth after owning multiple of these vehicles, but there are a lot of pros, and I think that they well outweigh the cons of the vehicles. But so if you're into that kind of stuff, if you want more Nissan content, hit that subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when new videos drop. I'm going to be doing a ton of Nissan content this year. So first things first, why is it such a great option? Price, okay? These things are budget friendly. So these trucks are financial steals of a deal, right? Like these things are so inexpensive, it is not even funny. I'm going to give you my prices and give you a little bit of an idea from when I bought my Xterra about 7 years ago now. I bought my Frontier about a year ago, so I can give you prices on both of those and give you a little bit more detail on that. So my numbers, when I bought my Xterra 7 years ago, so that would have been about 2015, I found one nearby to me. It was actually for sale on like Facebook Marketplace, and it was a gentleman whose daughter had been driving it for college, and they had gotten her a new vehicle. It was an '05 with about 94,000 miles on it. He had serviced it at the dealership, done all the work at the dealership. It had great paperwork on it. It was in really good condition. It needed a brake job and a brake bleed, but once I had that done, it felt like a new truck. It drove great. The engine and transmission were super strong. So it was a fantastic vehicle. When I bought that truck, I paid $7,000, okay? 2005 in 2015, so 10 years old, with 94,000 miles, I paid $7,000 for that vehicle, which was awesome. At the same time, I was looking at like 99 through 01, 02 4Runners and Tacomas, and they were anywhere from like 11 to 15 grand with comparable miles. Most of them, even for like 10 to 11 grand, still had like 150 to 200,000 miles on them. So again, is a Toyota a better built vehicle? Yes, I will give it to you Toyota people. I think the Toyota trucks, I have a Lexus as my other daily driver car, and it's a fantastic car. Super rock solid, super reliable, has 124,000 miles on it. It's an '07. It still drives like a top perfectly. But so they are great cars, but I'm just not, me personally, I wasn't willing to spend almost twice as much for a vehicle with even more miles, in some cases double, 2.5 times the mileage that my Xterra had for twice the money, 50% to 100% more than what I was going to be paying for the Xterra. When I bought that, I had it for 5 years. Again, super reliable. I had to do brakes on it. I had to do some suspension stuff. I was slowly sort of upgrading it anyways, so it kind of worked out that I would just upgrade stuff as it started to go bad. I did have to do wheel hubs a couple of times, front and rear, especially if you're going to be doing water crossings and off-roading and things like that. That's just going to happen. But they're 150, 200 bucks for a pair of them, and then it's probably a good solid 3 to 4 hour job. Probably less. I kind of can't remember. I just took my time and did it one wheel at a time, did the fronts, and then like a year later, I think I did the rears. So anyways, really, really reliable truck for $7,000. I mean, I could not beat it. So that's kind of the price side of it, right? So the price thing is huge. I think that that is a huge benefit to the Nissan stuff. And that's kind of what got me into it, is that I had several Nissans. They had all been bulletproof for me. And so I just jumped back into them. And then when I looked at the prices, I was like, yeah, absolutely, this is a no-brainer. So again, prices are fantastic. That is a good reason to check one out. Number 2 is capability. So a lot of these vehicles, you know, some of the, I'm going to kind of move through them one by one. So the R51 Pathfinder, the 05 through 2012 Pathfinder, some of those came with the VK56, which if you don't know is the 5.6 liter V8 that is in the Nissan Titan truck. It's in some of the big full-size vans and stuff like that. It's in the Armada. It's a big, beefy, strong motor, and they're also really bulletproof. So you can actually find factory-equipped V8 Pathfinders with a third row of seats, tons of room in there, or you can pop those seats out and have more storage in the back than an Xterra. Those are some really cool trucks. Now, the Pathfinders do have springs in the rear, so they are just a little bit different. They're coils all the way around, they're springs all the way around, so they're not leafs like the Xterra and the Frontier, so they are a little bit different. They don't have quite as much support as the Xterra or the Frontier from an aftermarket standpoint, so it is a little bit more difficult to find mods and things like that. But I mean, even stock, those things can do a lot of stuff, and there are definitely ways and tons of forums out there with supporting information and Facebook groups and stuff like that where you can find information on how to modify these things. So, you know, they are a great option. Next, Xterra. I have owned an Xterra. I had one for 5 years. I put about 50,000 miles on it, hard miles, lots of long distance travel to get to destinations, and then multi-day overlanding trips, and just kind of beat the crap out of it. And that thing was still running perfectly at 150,000 miles, ran like a top. I mean, it was bulletproof. It was amazing. Ran just perfect temp all the time, never overheated, no problems whatsoever. Just an amazingly reliable vehicle. The reason that I ended up getting rid of it was actually just because I wore out all the suspension components. The calipers were leaking. I was at a point where it was going to cost me almost as much money to fix it as it, you know, more probably to fix it than what it was worth. So I decided just to kind of cut and run and move on to a Frontier because I liked the idea of the truck, and I found this one, which was extremely modified already with a Titan swap and a bunch of other things I'll get into later. So then that kind of made sense to make that leap. But for the Xterras, again, from like 05 through 15, there was a year change from 09 to 2010. In 2010, they did a fix. There was a problem with the earlier Xterras and the Frontiers where the coolant could mix with the oil, and you'd basically get what they call the strawberry milkshake of death, which is always a bad thing. Strawberry milkshake of death does not sound appealing at all. So they did roll out a recall for that, and they did fix that on those earlier vehicles. So you want to make sure that that work was either done, or you want to verify yourself that it doesn't have that and that it has the bypass performed, which again, you can find that stuff on like Facebook groups and on forums and stuff like that. Or if you get a 2010 or newer, they fixed it in that later year switch. So there was a slight fascia change in the front, so the grille looks a little bit different. They look a tiny bit different, but they're basically the same truck, same engine, same transmission, same everything from 05 through 15. The earlier on vehicles before the year switch were called off-roads. So there are a few trim levels in these vehicles, and the one that is probably the most important for someone looking to get into overlanding and things like that is in the 05 through 09, it was called the off-road trim. In 2010 through 15, they changed it to the Pro 4X trim. But they're basically the same thing. The biggest thing about it is you get an electronic rear locker. So, you know, to have more capability and things like that, it's really nice to just have a push-button locker that you can just hit and turn on the locker. Start, you know, locks up your rear wheels, and then you've got twice as much grip in the rear as you would normally when one is slipping, right? So off-road trim or Pro 4X trim are the most desirable in those Xterras. With that, I mean, you're basically pretty capable from the factory. They're also really easy to lift. You can put a 2.5-inch lift on it pretty easily without a lot of supporting modifications. There's a really cheap rough country one, which is okay. It's definitely budget-minded. I think I paid about $150 for mine when I got it. And it's just a spacer lift up front and then a longer shackle in the rear. Really easy to install. Maybe it took me a half a day, not even, a couple hours maybe. And so it was a piece of cake to install, which was really nice. But it did kind of ride like crap. So if you need to make the space to fit bigger tires, you can do that, but it's not as ideal as a full sort of like a Niztec setup or something like that, which are much more nice riding and will give you a lot more flex. And with proper upper control arms being replaced, you will also then avoid what they call coil bucket contact, where the upper control arm contacts the top of the coil bucket. Makes a ton of noise, it's really hard on the components, it's just not ideal. But with that, you can easily fit 33s on the truck. and get a ton of flex out of it, which is really nice. So again, for really, really inexpensive, you could take a stock Xterra, throw a rough country lift on it, throw some 33s on it, and if you have a Pro 4X or an off-road, you're going to have a rear locker, and you're going to be able to do 90% of the things that probably my truck can do. So super, super capable from the factory. One downside of all of these trucks is gas mileage. They are not great. The Toyota equivalents aren't great either, so it's not really a big disadvantage. It's just if you're looking for something that's going to get you 20 plus miles per gallon, these trucks are not it. You'd be lucky to get 15 to 18 in a lot of cases. On my current setup, I get about 10 to 11 miles per gallon. Now, I've got a lot of weight. That kind of explains it, but not the most fuel efficient vehicles, any of these. So then that's the Xterra, right? Look for those trim levels if you want a locker. If you don't really care so much, I had an SE, was mine, sort of the top trim. It has a 9-speaker Rockford Fosgate system in it, which was really nice. It has power options and everything. And it was a really nice truck. It just didn't have the locker, was the only sort of downside. But I still went all over the place and pretty much did anything that I wanted with no problems. So it was a really great truck. So then moving into the Frontier, the capability of these things is pretty phenomenal. They are really great trucks with a sort of high clearance bumper like mine in the rear. There is quite a bit of that stock bumper that gets cut off for that, and then that bumper gets mounted up there. I don't rub on anything. I don't touch anything, even in some pretty extreme wheeling situations where other people that have seemingly more capable trucks than mine or some big lifted Jeeps and things like that are having some difficulties. I go right through and I don't touch anything. So it's really, really nice. Again, just like the Xterra, there are similar trims. They were called off-roads. I think there was a Nismo version for a minute, and then there was the Pro 4Xs that came later at 2010 and on. Those also have the e-locker. So again, basically these trucks are the same. They have the same 4-liter V6. They have the same 5-speed transmission. They are just bulletproof trucks that they made for years and years and years. So parts are cheap to find. Parts are easy to install. They're very modifiable. So as far as that goes, as far as the capability from the stock factory settings, these things are amazing, right? Like they're great little off-roaders, they're really comfortable, and they'll go for hundreds of thousands of miles, which is fantastic. So then lastly, let's talk about aftermarket support. Now, we all know that Toyota and Jeep have fantastic aftermarket support. Nissan does struggle a little bit there. There is not as much of a sort of following, as much of a aftermarket for them, but it's getting better and better all the time. Even since I bought mine 5, 6, 7 years ago, there have been a number of new products introduced. I mean, those trucks, they made millions of them, right? Like they were around forever. So they are starting to get some really good support, and there are some really nice companies out there making some really cool products. One of the things that I really like about these trucks is just exactly how easy they are to modify and customize. One of the things that's really neat that I have not done to my truck yet is what they call a VK swap. So like I mentioned in the Pathfinder, some of those Pathfinders came with the VK56 engine in them. They come with a 5.6 liter V8. It is very easy and very possible to do a V8 swap into Frontiers, Xterras, and Pathfinders. Very easy. A lot of guys are doing them in their garages in a weekend, right? It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is surprisingly easy. It does not require a ton of modification. It does not require a ton of stuff. You have to get a new wiring harness. You basically have to remove your, say, stock Frontier wiring harness and send it into a place like Off-Road Gorilla is a shop that will do the rewire your harness, and they'll basically attach it so that they make it so that you can put it back in the truck and it will work a VK56 and keep all your factory options. So you'll still have your air conditioning, heat, all that stuff will work just like factory from just doing that swap of the harness and then installing the V8. But a shop could do it for you. I mean, they're going to charge you, right? It's going to cost you a lot more money than doing it yourself, but you get kind of a turnkey returned vehicle, which is kind of nice. But it's pretty straightforward. The things just bolt in and bolt out. You don't even need different motor mounts. The V8 swaps right in over the V6 and mounts to the same motor mounts. It's awesome. So anyway, so you can do a V8 swap. My truck is what they call Titan swapped, and I am now fully Titan swapped front and rear. But basically what they do is they pull all the components out of, say, a wrecked Nissan Titan, and those all bolt right up under the truck. So you get a lot longer travel, you get beefier components, you get bigger brakes. There are a lot of advantages to doing that. And I mean, you could do the front for maybe couple $2-3 grand worth of parts, and you could do that in a weekend. You know, it's pretty simple to do, which is really nice. So when I bought my truck, it was front Titan swapped, and then it just had spacers on the rear. And then I ended up bending a shock mount, and I broke an axle shaft, and some other things were happening. And I was like, you know what? I don't know the history of this axle at all, anyways. So I'm just gonna buy a M226, which is like the big 12-bolt axle out of the Titan, and I'm gonna swap that in to match my front track width. So now I have a full-size Titan axle in the rear. It's basically the same as the axle in the Frontier, but wider, obviously. because it goes in the Titan, but they're basically the same thing. And then I swapped in a Spicer E-Locker, which is basically like the stock unit. So now I have a rear Titan axle swapped, locked rear end in the truck that matches the front width of the truck, and it's gravy. It looks amazing. It feels amazing. And you get bigger brakes and all that sort of stuff that I mentioned earlier too. So lots and lots of benefits. But again, I mean, you know, for probably somewhere in the ballpark of like 7 to 10 grand, you could, if you were willing to do it yourself, if you're pretty handy, for probably like 7 to 12 grand, you could do a V8 swap and a Titan swap front and rear on your truck. Find a wrecked Titan, pull all that stuff out of it, swap it into your truck. I mean, for cheap. You could probably even just find a whole wrecked Titan that was a Pro 4X or off-road model that has the rear locker, and just pull all those parts off of there and put them right into your truck. It's amazing. So there's so much capability and so much modifiability there. And again, the aftermarket support is starting to pick up on it. Again, to kind of wrap up here, price, huge consideration that makes this a really good option for overlanding. You know, capability just stock from the factory. Tons and tons of awesome options that come with these things. If you get the right trim level, you can get a locker even, and they're just great trucks, and they're so cheap. And then third, aftermarket support, you know, has gotten a lot better. There's so much modifying that you can do. There's so many Nissan parts that you can swap over from different trucks onto these trucks. So there's a ton of capability that can be added through the aftermarket. So again, I hope that was helpful for you. If you are thinking about vehicles, if you don't have a rig yet and you're looking for one and you're not sure what to look at, you should definitely consider a Nissan, because I don't work for Nissan or anything like that, but I've had a bunch of them again, and they're fantastic. And because of that, I talk about them all the time, because I really think that they're underestimated. I think that people are missing the boat on the Nissan Frontier, Xterra, and Pathfinder, because they're just like, well, I need to get a Tacoma, right? Everybody has a Tacoma. There must be a reason. And there is. They're great trucks, but these are almost just as good, and they're a fraction of the price with a ton of capability and features built into them. So, again, I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, click that like button. If you're not already, make sure to click that subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when new videos drop. I do a couple videos every week. So I'm doing a podcast/vlog like this, where I'm kind of, you know, talking about something like this topic or general overlanding stuff or newbie type stuff. Then I also do like gear reviews or do-it-yourself modification or budget-minded gear stuff. You know, anything to do with gear, mods, or do-it-yourself stuff, you'll find it here. So again, click that subscribe button. I'd love to have you. Also in the description below are links to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to hang out. I'm all over the place. I'd love to have you wherever you want to hang out. Come in and watch, come and like and subscribe and hang out. That's a lot of hangouts, I said. Also in the description below are links to merch. I've got patches and stickers and things like that, which are all overlanding related. So if you're into that kind of stuff, click through that link and check that out. And then also there is a Patreon group, which is awesome. These guys are amazing. We have a Discord where we chat. We do like a once a month get together on Zoom, and we all kind of hang out and talk about our rigs and our builds and things like that. So if you want to be a part of that, I'd love to have you hop over there and to the Patreon page. And then last but not least, the Facebook group. I have a Facebook group called Newbie Overlanders that is kind of intended to be a safe place for newbies, where they're not going to get beat up like in an Overlanding USA or some of those other bigger groups on Facebook. So if you're looking for a group where you can kind of ask questions and learn without being harassed by people that are just going to be trolling you, that is the place for you. Come and hang out. But that'll do it for this episode. So thanks for listening if you're on the podcast. Thanks for watching if you're on YouTube. And we'll see you guys next week.